Joining me now, Democratic strategist and HED president Fred Hicks, and pollster and WPA Intelligence CEO Chris Wilson. And Chris, I want to start with you. Your reaction to what J.D. Vance told Maria yesterday.
Well, I think Vance's willingness to take on Republicans as well as Democrats does show he's not beholden to Washington interests. I think he's done a very good job focusing on Harris's record rather than engaging in personal attacks, and it demonstrates the strategy that he understands and is focused on, which is appealing to policy-minded voters. And I also like his emphasis on prosperity and peace under Trump. I mean, that's kind of where his message went. It wasn't a soundbite, but I think that resonates with voters concerned. Your last segment was all about the economy, and then you're hearing me talking about national security, and those are the things he's talking about. So I think J.D. Vance is on message and doing a good job in terms of appealing to voters and pushing the criticisms aside.
So you don't think that he's a drag on the campaign?
No, I really don't. Not at this point. It's too early to tell something like that. I mean, ultimately, until Harris names her vice president, we won't know kind of how they match up. And I think at this point, he's a help in some states that in which his background really does matter.
So, Fred, you say that all of the different vice presidential choices for Harris have strengths and weaknesses. What are you saying, and what are you seeing?
Well, first I want to say that I think that J.D. Vance misses the whole point that we're not saying that he himself is weird. We're saying that his positions, calling childless women catless or women and referring to people who don't have children as they should have less voting power, and his anti-woman message is weird. But aside from that, with respect to the vice presidential candidates in front of Vice President Harris at this point, I think that there are a number of candidates who are very strong. And the thing that the vice presidential pick will indicate, as it did on the Republican side, is it will give us a view or a window into how the candidate sees this race. I think when former President Trump selected Vice President or J.D. Vance to be his vice presidential candidate, that indicated that he felt very confident, and he had every right to do so at the time because he was up in every swing state poll, and he was up in the national polls, and he was raising all the money. So he picked someone he thought was, well, he didn't really need to appeal to the middle because things are going well. And so I think what we'll see from Vice President Harris will indicate how she sees the race at this point.
Yeah, no, I mean, certainly a lot has happened, and it's only been 1 month and change since that debate, to your point. And the campaign for both has really shifted. The candidate shifted on the Democratic side. So let's talk about the swing states. Harris and Trump are basically near deadlock in the battleground states. So Harris is leading Trump by only 2 points in Nevada. In Wisconsin, Georgia, and North Carolina, Trump is leading Harris. Now, the two are tied in Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Arizona. Fred, I want to go to you first on this because this does influence, I would think, her VP pick, especially if it is Josh Shapiro, which does seem to be the leading contender right now.
So the data is really interesting. Kamala Harris has been the nominee or the presumptive nominee for about 3 weeks now. And over that period, she's raised about $300 million. She has gained about a point a week in the polls, and she has signed up over 200,000 volunteers. And so I think by any objective measure, she has the momentum. She knows that. We Democrats know that. And I think most importantly, Donald Trump knows that, and he's been behaving quite, erratically on the national stage, including here in Georgia just last week, the other day, when he attacked a very popular governor. So with that being said, I think when we look at these polls, and we have to understand that when Kamala Harris became the presumptive nominee 3 weeks ago, she was behind in every single swing state. And to get to the point now where in Georgia some polls have her tied, and in the other swing states we're seeing very similar kind of numbers, that says to me that she now has the luxury to try to expand the map. And so while I think Josh Shapiro does have the inside track, I'm hearing a lot of noise and a lot of conversations about Governor Walz out of Minnesota, someone who would be very appealing to the left, someone who would be very appealing to African American minority voters.
A progressive pick, yeah, I've seen that as well. That if she picks Walz, that signals that she is still leaning into those progressive stances and policies, which is not the moderate, message that I think they're trying to go for, because you are now into the general election. And Chris, I want to pick up on something else, because Fred mentioned the electoral map. I mean, look, this all does come down to, again, Arizona, Georgia, but I want to ask you about Michigan, Chris, because what does the data show you coming out of Michigan? That is, in particular, the Muslim, the Palestinian voices out of Michigan have been very, very critical of President Biden. How does she handle that? Because Michigan at this point is where we're seeing a neck-and-neck race, but that progressive left could come back to hurt her in Michigan.
Yeah, and what you can define as progressive left, I define as a portion of it as an anti-Semitic voice that is really pushed, I think, is making big waves to try and keep Josh Shapiro, who is, of course, a Jewish descent, and trying to keep him off the ballot. And that is unfortunate, and I think it's the sort of thing that has no place in American politics in either party, quite candidly. And so to see them have the kind of voice and of course they do, I mean, the fact that he served in the IDF has become a major issue with some of those voices out of Michigan. Is just, again, it has no place in politics, and it's unfortunate to see. I would also point out from an overall polling perspective that at this point in 2020, Biden and Harris had an 8-point lead over Trump and Pence. So the fact that it's a dead heat right now, I think, speaks very well for where Donald Trump is positioned. But the thing that really stood out for me on this poll, and this is more of a national thing than it is a Michigan issue, but it certainly affects Michigan because the economic issues there are dominant, and that is economic concerns. And Trump is still favored by voters on this issue. Again, your last segment was talking about the economic concerns right now and how it's hitting average people. Only 25% of people in the poll said they expect to be better off financially if Harris wins, compared to 45% for Trump. That is a big deal, and it matters. And nearly half of voters say President Trump's policies will make them financially better off. Only 20 points believe that 20 points would they say that they'd be better off. 6 points say Harris would make them worse off. Mm-hmm. And so those are the kind of issues I think are making people decide. But I'll tell you the one thing that really stood out to me on the poll, and you mentioned the voices coming out of Michigan, is where this race is right now with Hispanics. And candidly, Harris has a lead, but it's only a 7-point lead right now. And if you think about that, it's 51 for Harris, 44 for Trump. Now, let's look at how Democrats have won Hispanics in the past. Biden won them by 33. Harris leads by 7. Clinton won them by 38. Harris leads by 7. Obama won them by 44. Harris leads by 7. We're looking at a complete shift of Hispanics in terms of their support for President Trump. And I think that is really the story coming out of this, and why you look at states like Nevada and Arizona, and that are closer, in New Mexico, candidly, that didn't make it into, that's making its way into a swing state because of the policies that Donald Trump has taken on the border that are appealing to Hispanics. And that's why this race is closer than it was in 2020.
Yeah, and that's why Mark Kelly is up at the top of the list for vice president, because of the border. And, you know, he's somebody that has really captured that audience in Arizona in particular. Well, we're going to know in the next 24 hours, gentlemen, who the choice is going to be, and then we'll have much more to talk about. Fred Hicks, Chris Wilson, great segment, guys. Thank you so much for being with me this morning.
Thank you for having us.
All right.